I am Helena Wright, 32 years old, living in Palo Alto, California, and working as a senior product strategist for a mid-sized gaming studio that most people have never heard of. On paper, my life looks clean and controlled, the kind of profile investors like. What people do not see is that I returned to my biological family 6 months ago, after 26 years of believing I was someone else's daughter, and that return quietly turned my life into a war. I was switched at birth in a private hospital in Northern California, a fact confirmed by court-ordered DNA tests that nobody in my new family wanted to acknowledge out loud. The family that raised me was kind, ordinary, and broke. The family that should have raised me is wealthy, old money, and obsessed with appearances. They welcomed me with cameras, lawyers, and smiles that never reached their eyes. The woman who replaced me is named Vivian. She grew up with my name, my inheritance, my place at the table, and my parents' unconditional loyalty. To them, she is the daughter who mattered, the one they invested in, the one they defended even when evidence piled up against her. I was the mistake they were forced to correct, not the child they lost. From the moment I moved into their glass mansion overlooking the bay, I understood the rules. I was allowed to exist, but not to disrupt. I was allowed to stay, but not to belong. Every dinner felt like a performance review where I did not know the metrics. Every smile carried a warning. I did not cry. I did not demand love. I observed. Years in tech had taught me that systems always reveal their weaknesses if you let them run long enough. Families are no different. My mother, Eleanor, spoke to me in the careful tone people use with strangers. My father, Richard, treated me like a legal complication he hoped would quietly resolve itself. My brother, Andrew, avoided me entirely. Vivian, however, watched me closely, measuring, calculating, smiling too often. She understood immediately that I was not there to beg. The first real crack appeared during a charity gala hosted at our house. Vivian accused me of stealing a vintage necklace in front of donors and board members. She cried on cue. Eleanor demanded I apologize. I realized then that truth would never protect me here. That night, alone in the guest wing, I made a decision that changed everything. If they insisted on treating me like a problem, I would become a solution. Not for them, for myself. I would stay quiet, stay patient, and learn every detail of the family empire that was built on my absence. They thought I was grateful. They thought I was weak. They were wrong. I planned to outgrow their lies, outthink their cruelty, reclaim my stolen identity, and dismantle the illusion that blood alone entitled them to decide my worth at last. Slowly. Living under the same roof with people who resented my existence was an education no degree could have prepared me for. Every morning in that house began the same way. Silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that pressed against my chest like a warning. Breakfast was served by staff who had known Vivian since she was a child and looked at me with polite confusion, as if I were a temporary guest who had overstayed her welcome. Eleanor insisted we eat together. She called it family time. In reality, it was surveillance. Vivian sat across from me every morning, perfectly styled, scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing up just long enough to smile. That smile never changed, but her eyes did. Her eyes tracked my movements, my reactions, my breathing. She wanted to know how much I knew, how far I might go, and whether I was dangerous. Richard spoke only when necessary. He asked about my job once, then never again. To him, my career was irrelevant. I was not part of his long-term vision for the family. I was an inconvenience introduced by a judge and a DNA lab. Andrew avoided eye contact altogether. He was the easiest to read. Guilt made him weak, and weakness made him unpredictable. Vivian, on the other hand, was disciplined. She never raised her voice. She never made direct threats. Instead, she created situations where I was always on the defensive. Invitations went missing. Staff received conflicting instructions. Stories were subtly altered so that I appeared rude, ungrateful, or unstable. Each incident was small enough to dismiss on its own. Together, they formed a pattern. The necklace accusation was only the beginning. 2 weeks later, my access to the family office was quietly revoked. The house manager told me it was a security update. 3 days after that, my name disappeared from the guest list of a fundraising dinner hosted in my own home. Eleanor apologized and blamed a clerical error. Vivian sent flowers to my room with a note that read, "Accidents happen." I started documenting everything. At work, I was used to systems, user behavior, financial flows, access hierarchies. The family operated the same way, just with better furniture and worse ethics. I noticed who signed which checks, who attended which board meetings, who deferred to whom in private. Vivian had influence, but not authority. Eleanor controlled social capital. Richard controlled money. Andrew controlled nothing. The family trust was the real center of gravity. I did not have access to it, but I did not need it yet. All I needed was time. Vivian underestimated me because she believed I wanted what she had. She assumed I wanted affection, recognition, a seat at the table. She never considered that I might be there to understand how the table was built. The turning point came when Eleanor asked me to attend a brunch with her philanthropic circle. She framed it as an opportunity to get to know the community. Vivian looked surprised, then amused. I accepted immediately. At the brunch, I listened more than I spoke. I watched Eleanor perform generosity like a rehearsed role. I noted which donors flinched at Vivian's jokes and which laughed too quickly. I learned who heard rumors first and who spread them. When one woman asked me how it felt to finally come home, Vivian answered for me. "It must be overwhelming," she said, touching my arm lightly. "Helena had such a simple upbringing. This world can be a lot." I smiled. "It is different," I said. "But systems are systems. You just learn them." Vivian laughed, dismissive. Eleanor frowned, just slightly. That night, I received an email from the family legal office. It informed me that a review was underway regarding my status in the household and that certain boundaries would be clarified. Vivian had moved faster than I expected. Good. Pressure made people sloppy. I replied politely, asked no questions, and forwarded the message to a private folder I had created weeks earlier. I labeled it evidence, because if they wanted to define my place, I intended to redefine the entire structure. And this time, I would not do it quietly. The legal review was supposed to intimidate me. That was obvious. Vivian wanted me nervous, reactive, eager to prove I deserved to stay. Instead, it clarified something I had only suspected before. They were not planning to integrate me. They were preparing to contain me. I started moving differently after that email. I stopped trying to blend in. I dressed sharper. I spoke less. I made myself harder to read. People always mistake silence for weakness, especially in families where power has never been questioned. Vivian escalated first. She began planting concerns about my mental stability. It started subtly. Eleanor would ask if I was sleeping well. Andrew would mention, awkwardly, that Vivian was worried I seemed isolated. A housekeeper quietly asked if I needed tea for stress. The narrative was forming without my participation. I recognized it immediately. Gaslighting dressed up as concern. A classic tactic when outright accusations fail. The moment I knew she had crossed from hostility into strategy was the night Eleanor invited me into her study. Vivian was already there, sitting far too comfortably in my mother's chair. Eleanor spoke carefully. She said the transition had been difficult for everyone. She said perhaps I needed time away from the house to process everything. Vivian added that she knew a wonderful wellness retreat in Arizona. Discreet, safe, restorative. They were testing the idea of removing me without legal force. I declined politely. That refusal changed the temperature of the room. Vivian's smile tightened. Eleanor looked offended. Not because I said no, but because I disrupted the illusion that this was about my well-being. After that, the gloves came off. My access badge to the garage stopped working. My name was removed from internal email chains that affected household decisions. A rumor appeared, somehow reaching a distant cousin, that I had financial problems and might be angling for money. Vivian underestimated one thing. She assumed my career made me irrelevant to their world. She never asked what I actually did. At work, my role was to analyze player behavior and monetization ethics in competitive online games. I specialized in identifying manipulation patterns, reward loops, artificial scarcity, psychological pressure points. The family was running the same game, just with inheritance instead of virtual currency. I started mapping everything. Who spoke to whom before decisions? Who changed behavior after conversations with Vivian? Which staff members mirrored her language? I noticed that Eleanor often repeated Vivian's phrasing verbatim, as if coached. I noticed that Richard deferred to Vivian on matters that should have concerned legal exposure. Most importantly, I noticed something off about the family trust. The numbers did not align. Distributions did not match reported performance. I could not see the documents, but patterns leave shadows. One evening, Andrew finally cracked. He found me in the kitchen late, pouring water, clearly having waited for the house to quiet. He looked exhausted, not angry. "You are not crazy," he said abruptly. I did not respond. "She has been doing this for years," he continued, "with people she does not like, slowly, so no one notices." I asked him why he was telling me now. He swallowed. "Because she is scared of you." That was confirmation. Andrew did not offer help. He did not apologize. He simply warned me that Vivian had convinced Eleanor I was preparing a lawsuit. The irony almost made me laugh. The next attack came at a public event. At a foundation board dinner, Vivian announced that she would be stepping into a leadership role traditionally reserved for biological heirs. She framed it as continuity. Eleanor praised her adaptability. Richard nodded. Then Vivian turned to me, smiling sweetly, and said she hoped I understood that some responsibilities required long-standing relationships and trust. It was a dismissal wrapped in applause. I waited until the end of the evening. As people were leaving, I approached one of the board members Vivian had tried hardest to impress, a man who had asked me earlier about my work. I answered his questions honestly. I did not mention Vivian at all. 2 days later, he requested a private meeting with Richard. The atmosphere shifted after that. Vivian became careful. Eleanor became distant. Richard started asking questions. Pressure was changing direction. Vivian responded the only way she knew how. She accused me of leaking private family information to investors. This time, she brought evidence, screenshots, messages taken out of context. Eleanor was furious. Richard was silent in a way that meant legal counsel was involved. I did not defend myself emotionally. I asked for a forensic review. Vivian did not expect that. The review revealed the messages were altered. Metadata did not match. The source device was traced back to a secondary phone registered under Vivian's assistant. The room went quiet. No apology followed. No admission. Eleanor said nothing. Vivian cried. Richard declared the matter closed. But something broke that day. They stopped pretending I was fragile. And I stopped pretending I was alone. Because I had learned enough. And soon, I would stop reacting. I would start deciding. After the forensic review, the house felt different. Not calme, sharper, like a room after a glass breaks and nobody moves, afraid of cutting themselves. Vivian stopped provoking me publicly. Instead, she watched. Eleanor withdrew into polite distance. Richard became attentive in a way that suggested calculation, not care. They were reassessing me. I used that time carefully. I requested access to archived family documents under the pretense of understanding my legal standing. Richard agreed, likely advised that transparency would make me easier to manage. He underestimated how quickly I could read patterns once the data was visible. The trust was not just mismanaged. It was being siphoned. Vivian had been routing funds through auxiliary foundations she controlled indirectly, using Eleanor's social cover and Richard's authority to mask the transfers. It was elegant, slow, designed to look like philanthropy while consolidating power. More importantly, it was illegal. I did not confront anyone. I copied everything. Vivian sensed the shift before she saw it. She started appearing in my space unexpectedly. Casual conversations, forced warmth. She asked about my childhood. She complimented my work. She offered collaboration. I declined without hostility. When manipulation fails, escalation follows. She arranged a private family meeting and framed it as reconciliation. Eleanor insisted. Richard attended. Andrew sat quietly, pale. Vivian spoke first. She said we had both been hurt by circumstances beyond our control. She said there was room for compromise. She proposed a financial settlement, a clean separation, enough money to disappear comfortably. They wanted me gone before regulators noticed anything. I asked one question: what happens if I say no? Silence answered for them. That night, my apartment lease was suddenly terminated. The next morning, my employer received an anonymous report accusing me of corporate espionage. By afternoon, a legal notice arrived alleging breach of confidentiality regarding family information. Vivian had overplayed her hand. I forwarded everything to my attorney. Within 48 hours, the situation inverted. My employer launched an internal investigation and cleared me. The anonymous report traced back to a private investigator on Vivian's payroll. The breach allegation collapsed under scrutiny. More importantly, my attorney flagged the trust irregularities to an independent auditor. Richard received notice first. He called me into his office, furious, not at Vivian, but at me. He accused me of endangering the family. I listened calmly and asked him if he had reviewed the auditor's preliminary findings. His anger faltered. Eleanor arrived midway through the conversation. She looked confused, then frightened, as the implications became clear. Vivian arrived last, composed but tense. The evidence spoke without emotion. There was no dramatic confession, no screaming. Vivian denied intent. Eleanor claimed ignorance. Richard focused on damage control. I told them I was not interested in revenge. That surprised them. I wanted control. I proposed a restructuring. Vivian would step down from all leadership roles. Eleanor would resign from public-facing boards. Richard would retain nominal authority, but relinquish operational control to an external management firm. In exchange, I would not pursue criminal charges. They accepted because they had no alternative. Vivian looked at me then with something close to hatred, stripped of calculation. For the first time, she understood that I was not there to replace her. I was there to end the game she built. Within weeks, the house emptied. Public narratives shifted. Vivian left for Europe under the guise of education. Eleanor retreated into charity work. Richard aged visibly. I moved out quietly. I did not need the mansion. I needed closure. The family lost influence, not money. Vivian lost leverage, not dignity. Eleanor lost certainty. Richard lost illusion. And I gained something far more valuable than inheritance. I gained authorship over my own life. Which is why, when the final message arrived months later asking if I would consider reconciliation, I did not reply. Some systems are not meant to be fixed. They are meant to be replaced. And I already had a future that did not include them. I live alone now in a quiet apartment overlooking a stretch of water that does not belong to anyone. No gates, no guards, no family name etched into stone. The mornings are silent in a way that feels earned, not enforced. I make my own coffee. I answer only the messages I choose to read. For the first time in my life, my nervous system is not bracing for impact. People assume that winning feels loud. They expect fireworks, public apologies, dramatic reconciliations. What I learned is that real victory is quiet. It is the absence of fear when your phone rings. It is the ability to sleep without replaying conversations in your head. It is knowing that nobody has the power to rewrite your reality behind closed doors. Vivian has not contacted me directly. She sends signals instead. Mutual acquaintances mention her name casually, as if testing whether it still has weight. It does not. I stopped tracking her movements months ago. She no longer occupies space in my decision-making, which is the only loss she ever truly feared. Eleanor sent a letter once, handwritten, apologetic in tone but careful in language. She wrote about misunderstanding, about loving two daughters, about wishing things had unfolded differently. I recognized the pattern immediately. Emotional revisionism without accountability. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer I rarely open. Some words are not meant to be answered. Richard never reached out. That does not surprise me. Men like him do not apologize. They wait for time to soften consequences and hope silence will do the work they refuse to do themselves. Andrew sent a message late one night. He said he hoped I was well. He said he wished he had done more. I believed him. I did not respond anyway. Healing does not require reopening every door that once hurt you. What I gained from that family was not wealth, status, or belonging. It was clarity. I learned how power operates when it is threatened. I learned how easily truth bends in rooms where everyone is invested in a lie. Most importantly, I learned that survival does not require permission. I do not hate them. Hate implies attachment. I have moved beyond that. They are a closed chapter, not a scar I revisit. My work has changed too. I no longer design systems that merely optimize engagement. I build safeguards now. I consult on ethical design. I speak quietly but clearly about manipulation, about consent, about how easily people mistake familiarity for trust. When I talk, people listen, not because of my name, but because of my precision. Sometimes, when the sun sets and the water turns dark, I think about the girl I might have been if none of this had happened. I do not mourn her. She never existed. I became someone else instead, someone sharper, someone intact. Blood gave me a beginning, choice gave me an ending. And if there is one thing I know with certainty now, it is this: I was never the problem they tried to manage. I was the variable they could not control.